Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's the last session of the day, and I'm sure your brains are by now almost overloaded with facts, figures, and a lot of what you already heard during the day. This session's topic is the risk of cyber warfare overstated. I think in one sense it really depends on what you mean by cyber warfare. There is any number of descriptions from disruption, destruction, sabotage, espionage, terrorism, crimes. And therefore, in each one of these, if you look at what impact it will have, the risk is there. It's already there. You've been talking about it from the early morning today. You've been talking of continuous preparation against that. But I think from the point of view of this session and what panelists are going to speak about and some of the issues, I'll just broadly put it up and then they will speak. If I were to give you a simple example from the government point of view, that if you had the Commonwealth Games and the Commonwealth Games got sabotaged, would you go to war? If your stock exchange got hit, would you go to war? If your power plant got hit, a few power plants, the entire nationwide power plants got hit, your communication network, your defense networks, and then of course the last you have is when you know that what we call as there's a geopolitical situation, you see rising tensions, maybe India-Pakistan, India-China and so on and so forth, and there's a rising tension, you see the preparations, etc., and then there's a great risk of a cyber attack which comes perhaps before the actual physical attack by the armies and air forces take place. We also see today cyber offense as a option. You know that you are likely to be attacked depending on the specific issues, and then you go and carry out offensive, preemptive strike against those areas where you believe that the threat is emanating from. And therefore it is something which is very, very critical in terms of what I would put it as, when do we go to war over cyber warfare, over cyber attacks? We have a distinguished panelists here who are going to speak on some of these and other issues in different contexts, in the Indian context and in the larger context. Panelists will speak for about 10 to 12 minutes each, following which we would open it up for some questions and answers, and after which I'll try to sum up at the end in terms of some of the issues that have been raised. I now call upon Lieutenant Davinder Kumar to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to DSCI to give me a chance to speak on the subject. And I've been a student on the subject for some time, a couple of years now. I'm going to give you an Indian viewpoint, and maybe during question answers, you're free to ask any amount, and we'll see if we can answer your questions. As far as cyber war is concerned, let's just take an environmental scan where we are today. I got 3 points to this, and first is that we are transiting at the moment from the industrial age to the information age. And different nations are at different places as far as this transition is concerned, and therefore this transition needs to be managed, and it is because of this transition certain aspects of cyber warfare are being played out, which I'll cover. Second thing which the chairman rightly pointed out is there is no universally accepted definition for cyber war, cyber attack, cyber whatever. So that at the moment it's just been said the way anybody understands this. And the third thing is that there is a sea change occurring in the kind of warfare. and I think that is important. I'll cover that. The first thing in the environment is that there's a change in the security paradigm. Physical security, as we know of, is really down the ladder. Economic security, energy security, food security, information security are a notch higher. So then, if you see the definition of war as given in different, or in the Clausewitz this thing, any one of these, if they're interfered or disrupted to a particular level threshold which the chairman mentioned, is a reason for us to go for a conflict situation, not necessarily a war situation. Besides this, there is a transformation of war taking place itself. Because of how the information age warfare is developing, you got long range, lethal, precision weapons, you got battlefield which encompasses the whole nation, and things like that. So therefore, there's a transformation of war. At one edge of this today, with the ICT available, is the no contact warfare. No contact warfare means information warfare, plus missile warfare, plus remote warfare. Remote warfare really is your drone strikes, which is being named there. So at the moment, these three constitute the no contact warfare. It is open. Tomorrow, weather warfare may add up, which is also, people are developing a lot of capability in that. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is that there is a transformation of war taking place. The more developed nations are opting for no contact warfare. The poorer nation, undeveloped nation are going for asymmetric warfare. And therefore, the spectrum of warfare is asymmetric to the whole hogged warfare of the no contact. The center of the no contact warfare is the information warfare, which is basically five things. That is, you have electronic warfare, computer network operations, you have military deception, you have psychological operation and operation security. Now therefore, why I'm saying so is cyber is really a subset of information warfare, which is the actual dimension as it's being called today. Inherent in the definition of information warfare is three things: the vulnerability of a network, the need to protect your networks, and of course, take offensive, attack the network. Now, that is one aspect that I wanted to cover. The second aspect I want to cover is what is cyberspace. Again, there is no definition. For the purpose of discussions today, our cyberspace means anything which is either connected or controlled by computer is cyberspace. Which means today, 2 billion plus computers, and it's adding up every minute, plus the associated switches, routers, cables, and all this is part of cyberspace. So that is something that we need to understand. And the cyberspace works through electromagnetic spectrum, which we'll cover later. With this definition of cyberspace, what's really happened is the cyber has now become a center of gravity of the globalized world, as indeed it has become a center of gravity of a nation as far as the conflict situation is concerned, or even diplomatic or other means of financial, economic are concerned. So it remains the center of gravity. So we've got to understand cyberspace to be able to answer that question: are we overstating the cyber war? Then comes the cyber power. Now, cyber power in simple term is your capability to wage a cyber war in the cyberspace. Cyberspace is growing every day. You add another computer, it goes. All those things are. Now, there are three main characteristics of cyber that we have, and that is basically it is all pervasive. Then it is complementary and it is stealthy. This is where the actual difference comes, that cyber war is complementary. Today, it doesn't have what is called the coercive ability. If you attack somebody's power network, if you attack somebody's air traffic control, it doesn't deter him to that extent, and it may be that it strengthens him to react in a different manner to your intervention. So till you develop the coercive power, like we have in case of nuclear weapons, the cyber develops a coercive power, it will remain a complementary warfare. Therefore, it's an instrument of warfare available to you. And it's not really today a domain of warfare which is available to you. Then the third thing is that I said it is a very stealthy thing. You can go into anybody's network, do what you want, You heard the botnet discussion on all that. You can plant malicious software. You can activate the software at a time of war or whatever. Those are attractive things as far as they are concerned. Now, with this as a background, let us see what are threat and vulnerabilities to India. You all know the telecom scene in India, so I'm not going to read out the figures of millions of here and there. The point is the youth, the demographic setup of India is very conscious of both the communication part of it as also the social media part of it, and therefore the vulnerabilities come along with it. Now, like all these smartphones that we are holding, we are not even sure what kind of vulnerabilities there are. In fact, there's a great market out there. Today you can buy vulnerabilities on the e-commerce sites. And I was telling the chairman that $120,000 one vulnerability for a 16-year-old boy. So that's the kind of pace with which cyber is moving. But I'm not getting into that. I'm sure you heard enough of that. What I really want to address this audience is that there are strategic deficiencies in our country which make us very vulnerable to cyber, and those are like we don't have a fab, for instance. We import all chips, so therefore we are open to the supply chain maneuvering. We don't have an indigenous operating system, and our adversary China, for instance, has both Unix and Linux based systems of their own. We don't have information security standards, testing and certification labs. You know the experiment that went with the Institute of Science or with Mahendra's, which got this thing. We have very limited capacity for cryptography and cryptanalysis, national policy on data storage and management, gross deficiency of language experts. Those are strategic deficiencies which open us to threats from the cyber world. Now, we have had incidents. I'm not going to say that these are actually because of cyber attacks. That is not yet proven. In fact, that's one of the advantages or one of the characteristics of cyber. We had the Terminal 3 booking and operating system malfunctioning here. We had the ATC radar malfunctioning at least 3 to 4 times. Breakdown on North India grid, which was reported. It happened twice. Breakdown on Northeast India grid, which was not reported by the government. Mass movement of students from Bangalore and all that. You heard that what Pakistan did to us. Failure of a particular satellite, probing attacks on our networks. I mean, even the PMO's network, ITBP. I mean, the adversary wanted to know what kind of training we are giving to the Indo-Tibetan border police and things like that. Biggest cyber attack in India happened in 2012, where everything, like including the PMO, DRDO, everything got attacked. India is the second largest victim of attacks today, ahead of the United States. The US is first, we're the second one. So that's the kind of threat that we face, and how do we eliminate this threat is going to offensive, developing capabilities, and that is really the message that I have. We have probing attacks coming in where people are finding out what are the junctions in our networks, where the congestion coming in, how can they cut the communications and things like that. And that is something that we got to take care of, and I have given a cyber triad that you need. And what is the cyber triad? First is resilience. You must develop resilience, have redundancy, have mechanism to restore your network, have graceful degradation in your network and things like that. And the second leg of triad is work on attribution. You must, one of the qualities, as you know, of cyber attack is that you can't attribute the attack to anybody. Japanese have produced the software. The United States have hijacked it immediately. In fact, that news item came from one line and that's it. And if we have the attribution capability, then things are much simpler. Then you're not fighting ambiguity. And a third and the most important is the offensive capability. With that as an introduction, I've just given a small threat matrix. I mean, you guys are in the business. Threat matrix from now to 5 years. As far as cyber crime is concerned, we are going from low to medium. As far as cyber espionage is concerned, we are at the moment very high. I mean, there are a lot of attack on for intelligence gathering, and it may taper down to medium if we put our cyber defenses correctly. Cyber attacks low at the moment, going to medium, and the probing attacks will increase. Social engineering attack very high, and very high. In fact, that is the actually seal of India at the moment. We've got to protect it, and potential overall threat by 2020 is very high. So, ladies and gentlemen, the message I'm giving is that the cyber war, as far as India is concerned, is certainly not being hyped up. It's a reality. We need to develop our capabilities to take on this kind of an instrument of warfare. And earlier we do, the better it is. We have window till 2020. You've got 6 years to stand up as a nation and say we are a known cyber power and not fall into the trap we did for nuclear things. Thank you very much.
I'll now request Wing Commander Ajey Lele from the Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis to make his presentation.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think after the remarks of the chair and the previous speaker, General Kumar, I don't have much to add. The first thing which comes to my mind is that the title of today evening's discussion or afternoon's discussion is the cyber warfare overrated? The first thing comes to my mind is that let's slightly go back to the history. When I'm saying slightly go back to the history, that means say 10 days back. 10 days back, there are many people in Delhi who believed that our party has got no future. But you all know that what is the reality. So today if somebody believes that cyber warfare is not a reality, I think he or she is also being part of the same process where people were thinking that Kejriwals have got no future. Because definitely cyber warfare is going to have a future. There have been certain amount of indicators. Which could be those indicators? You all know the famous 2007 issue of Estonia. If you can bring down a country just by using a cyber attack, definitely cyber attack has got much more to be taken pretty seriously. Other aspect is that you had few other cases. You all know that how the viruses and worms like Flame and Stuxnet was used. It was used for the national security purposes by a particular country to see to it that the nuclear facilities of other country are disabled. Then there are certain other incidences also. There are few minor incidences but very interesting incidences. A few years back there was a case where a patient was killed in a hospital by manipulating the dosages into the computer which was available into the hospital, and a wrong dosage was given and that dosage was manipulated by somebody. So you know what a cyber can do. Then there are recent incidences. In 2012, I believe Iran has successfully compromised around 30,000 plus computers of Saudi Arabia. This year, only in month of March and April, North Korea has compromised computers of South Korea to the tune of around 32 to 35,000. So what I'm trying to say is that the threat is there. Now, is the risk there? The issue is that you go back to the debate which was there in early 1980s. There was a debate which was taking place between the sociologists from German and Brits. The sociologists from German origin were of the opinion that we are staying in a risk society. Because of the modernization, every day new risks are emerging and we are going to see more and more such types of risks which are going to come, and we will never be prepared to address those risks because they will always overtake us or they will surprise us. While the debate which was there in the Britain was saying that no, we are unnecessarily hyping the risks. So today we are at a stage where we need to really understand and appreciate is the risk of cyber warfare being hyped. Now what is a warfare is all about? Right now if one tries to look at a warfare, one will try to see to it that as the technology develops, the nature of a warfighting changes. Gone are the days after the aircrafts got invented, the entire new notion, new concept of aerial warfare came in. When initially Wright brothers had invented the aircrafts, nobody had ever thought that this particular flying machine could be used for the warfare. Similarly, one can give lot amount of examples where the technology has essentially developed the warfare further. We all know that today if you really have to make a compromise with various United States warfighting mechanisms, then what you need to do is that just attack their GPS, because they've got huge amount of a dependence on the GPS. So similarly one can give a lot of examples that the way technology has progressed, similarly the warfare also has progressed. Hence the reason people are saying that the way information technology is progressing, it is going to impact the warfare. Right now what we are in the era of say Internet 1.0, but definitely when we shift to Internet 2.0, Internet 3.0, we are in the era of artificial intelligence. When are we going to shift from artificial intelligence to ambient intelligence? When we are getting into cognitive technologies, cognitive sciences, when we are going to do a breakthrough into the areas of say quantum computing. Right now you know that stealth mechanisms are there, few other autonomous systems, the robotics is there, as it was already mentioned, that drones are making and changing the nature of warfare. So similarly, there are huge amount of investments which have been done by many other countries into the ITC sector, and those investments are finding their position into the changing nature of warfare. Now one can argue what could be the advantage of a cyber warfare. There could be far two advantages. One is that one can say that it is a bloodless warfare. Most important thing is that as far as espionage is concerned, you all know from the famous recent case what happened in the United States about the Snowden incidents, that espionage is not considered as an act of war. Number two is that as far as warfare is concerned, for any form of a war, for every action there is a reaction. But for cyber action, till date at least, there has been no kinetic reaction. That means no country has attacked a cyber attack by a conventional warfare. So under these circumstances, one must understand that a cyber warfare in totality can't be considered as a warfare. Today, where are we standing on? We are standing on a threshold where we all know that conventional warfare is the key. That means your Air Force, your Army, your Navy are going to be the key factors. But at the same time, the country gains a superiority when country has got nuclear superiority. So that means today when you are conventionally strong and you got an additional arm of nuclear stuff, then you call yourself superior. Now what happens is that even though the technology is developing, it's not necessary that every aspect of a technology should come into form of war fighting. There are various reasons to it. There are few more important reasons which needs to be mentioned is that you must appreciate that military industrial complex is a huge subject. It's a huge subject because there are huge amount of or significant amount of financial investments which have been made. So no country which is depending on military industrial complex would like to change the nature of warfare and get into a cyber warfare just for the heck of it, fully understanding that this is the most easiest form of warfare. At the same time, this could be one of the most cheapest form of warfare. If we look back at the history of warfare, one can see that, I will just quote one or two examples. You got a case which happened in early 70s, when in the United States you had a very interesting combination of Henry Kissinger and Nixon were in the government. At that point of time, they had propagated to the rest of the world saying that biological weapons are the most heinous weapons and we need to ban them. And everybody believed them and everybody ended up banning them. But the underhand agenda was that today they got a nuclear superiority. Biological weapons are easy to make weapons. If rest of the world is able to manage this technology, then they will definitely challenge my nuclear superiority. You must have seen the recent case in Syria. They went ahead and literally seen to it that chemical weapons are no longer existing onto the soil of Syria. What these chemical weapons have done? Maybe 1,000 deaths. More than that, 10 to 20 times more deaths are taking place by the conventional warfare. But nobody is making any hue and cry about it. Why the hue and cry about chemical weapons? Because it is challenging your nuclear superiority. So one must understand that even if the technology develops, it's not necessarily that it will come into a warfare. There are a few other cases. You know the case of aircraft, that is a Concorde aircraft. I can go to London from this place within 2 hours. The technology was pretty foolproof technology barring one odd accident. But people realize that if you go ahead with the Concorde technology, then the first class and the business class passengers are having problems because you are not getting those sorts of passengers for your normal flights. So the industry had seen to it that a successful technology is again not being brought into a practice. Similarly, these types of things could happen with the cyber technology too. But the only advantage with cyber technology is that you can't really do anything much about it because it is all into open. I can do a cyber attack by using one computer also. So right now the world is standing at a threshold where there has been a debate which is going on whether the cyber attack or a cyber warfare in a very broad sense will happen or not. It's not that the technology is not there. The problem is with the perceptions. So at the end I will only say that when I am looking at a cyber warfare, the threat is definitely there, but it is not a very definitive threat, but a suggestive threat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lele. I now request Patil to speak behalf.
Thank you, Chair. It's always a very tough job for the last speaker, but nonetheless, at the cost of sounding repetitive, I would nonetheless like to highlight some of the points. In response to the title of this session, is the risk of cyber warfare overstated? My short reply is no. In fact, it is understated and misunderstood. And what are the considerations when I say this? The first is essentially about the definition. I have a problem with the terminology of cyber warfare itself. What constitutes an act of war in the cyberspace? It's completely different in a physical world when you see a tank or a fighter plane of an enemy country into your airspace, into your territory. You can take that as an act of war. That tank or plane hitting certain industries, certain critical infrastructure, you can take that. But in the case of virtual attacks, that's not the case. So you really don't know what constitutes an act of war in the cyberspace. And then the concept of cyber war itself, the term itself, I have a problem with with a very limited understanding of the term cyber war, because as what the US policymakers would like us to believe, that it is, in a sense, a part of conventional warfare, constituting, apart from the naval warfare, the aviation warfare, and the land warfare, there's another branch of warfare which is called as cyber warfare, and which is evident from the fact that in 2010 the United States set up the Cyber Command. But as some experts have pointed out, that we need to go beyond that conventional understanding and look at the non-Western definitions of what is warfare itself. And I would like to draw the attention to what the Chinese call as information war. For them, cyber warfare is just one part of it. For them, the information war is the one which, apart from the physical violence, also causes social chaos, economic loss, also a sort of cultural domination by the enemy. And that's the holistic understanding of what warfare is. And that's why they call it as information warfare. Also, the definition of cyber warfare, which is coming from the Western world, excludes the power to conduct non-war activities, like espionage, which is happening on a daily basis in the cybersphere. But espionage constitutes an essential element of what is ultimately going to cause a war. So that has led us to, in a sense, misunderstand the term cyber warfare. And this primarily stems from the fact that since the dawn of the digital age or the internet age, almost 3 decades back, there hasn't really been an attack in the cyberspace which has caused physical violence. I mean, I'm sure all of us here must have read this book by Thomas Reed, which came this year, which famously proclaims that cyber war will not take place. And he argues that under the 3 guidelines given by the Prussian military strategist Karl von Clausewitz, any act of cyber offense to be constituted as a war must comply with the 3 criteria. 1, it must be violent or potentially violent. Secondly, it should be instrumental, that the attack should force the attacked state to comply by the political will of the aggressor. And third, that act must have a goal, a political goal or intention. So going by this definition, not a single case of cyber attack or cyber war has taken place in this world. But again, going back to what I was saying in terms of the definition itself, the fact is that we really have to visit this definition, and we have to see what it means to have a cyber war. Does it mean introducing cyber elements into warfare, or does it mean that putting warfare into the cyber domain? And if we take into account the first aspect, we are already in the cyber warfare age, because we already have sophisticated technologies being used to conduct warfare, the precision guided weapons, the smart bombs, all the laser bombs, so we already have cyber warfare. And if you look at the warfare in the cyber domain itself, the 3 basic principles of the warfare still dominate: the force, the maneuver, and the strategy. Second consideration that I am putting forward is to look at cyber warfare not as a conventional threat, but as a non-conventional threat. While most of the Western policymakers look at cyber warfare as a conventional threat, a more appropriate approach would be to look at cyber war as a non-conventional threat, in the sense that because there has been a transformation in the nature of warfare, causing violence is not now the primary goal of warfare. Economic loss, is one of now, because of the importance of the economic capabilities, the material capabilities, that is, and causing loss to that is one of the primary goals of the warfare. And as I said, particularly in case of India, with the introduction of the nuclear weapons, the case for a major conventional war has really gone down. But concomitantly, we have also seen the rise of a sub-conventional warfare like terrorism. And this is where cyber warfare does fit in. Then looked at from this angle, all the acts of sabotage which happen in the cybersphere, the cyber espionage, the data theft, the distributed denial of service, all this would make a sense because they ultimately hit out at India's economic potential. And we have examples of that happening too many. I mean, I can just recall 3 instances, as also the chair would be aware. The fact that when that blasphemous movie from Innocence of Muslims was released, there was this lot of outcry against that, and then we saw instances of planted material on the social networking sites from the enemy states designed to cause unrest, which ultimately caused violence in India. The second example is also again the northeastern community fleeing from Bangalore, and again those SMSs which came to be forwarded. The original SMSs came from again the hostile states. And the third example is again the violence which took place against the Muslims in Myanmar, and the way it was depicted, as if to show that the violence had taken place much earlier, but it was the pictures planted on the social networking sites showed as if the violence is taking place now, and that caused an outrage or a backlash from the Muslim community, and that created tensions in India. Another consideration which I put forward is the lack of attribution, and despite all the technological wherewithal that we possess, it is still difficult to identify from where did the attack originate. You may go back to a country from where the server to a country from where the attack originated, but you cannot be precisely sure that the attack originated from that country. You may be sure yourself, but your surety should stand the scrutiny of the law, and it should stand the scrutiny and convincing it to the public also that the attack has really originated from this country. So this lack of attribution also creates confusion. The idea of attrition, the attrition warfare. I go back to what happens in the nuclear technology, and during the heydays of the nuclear technology, just after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the early 50s and the 60s, well, everybody said, well, now what has happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we are not going to see any act of nuclear war. And then you see all the countries making a clamor for gathering the nuclear technology. The same is happening with here also. We're talking about cyber Pearl Harbor happening, as well as the critical infrastructure being targeted. Everybody is saying cyber technology is bad, but nonetheless, every country, there's a report which says that around 120 countries are augmenting their cyber capabilities, offensive capabilities, to hit out at their enemy countries. Cyber warfare gives them the idea of the attrition warfare. So unlike a nuclear strike which decimates everything completely and does not have a chance for a second attack, or again a second attack from the enemy state targeted at you, cyber warfare gives you the chance to indulge in an attrition warfare where the enemy can hit out at you, at your critical infrastructure, at your protected sites with regular intervals. The attack may not take place on the same site, but the attack will take place again and again. So that in a sense is also, the point is not understood. Then the question is about the ambiguous capabilities. I again go back to the nuclear technology. You can demonstrate that you possess a nuclear technology by way of conducting a missile test, by way of conducting a nuclear test, or at least displaying your nuclear weapons in a military parade. That doesn't happen with cyber capabilities. Cyber capabilities, you can say that, I have conducted the hacking operation, but then that's just a claim. You really, because of the lack of attribution, you really cannot yourself convince the public that you are the ones who carried out attack. So for instance, the Stuxnet attack, which hit out at Iran, there is an ample evidence and there is ample documentation in the open space domain which suggests that the attack was the handiwork of the US and the Israel. But there is no hard evidence which suggests that it was actually from the US and Israel. And that goes back to the security dilemma concept in the international relations. Because you are not sure of what your enemy is up to, you go on acquiring the capabilities. So that constitutes the offense and defense dilemma. And notably, we live in an era of dominance of the offensive capabilities. Second point, the next point is about consideration is the availability of the cyber technology. Again, going back to the nuclear field, there are safeguards to control the spread of nuclear technology. There are international agreements in place. Unlike that, in the case of cyber technology and the offensive cyber technology, there are these virtual underground black markets where these exploits, where these leakages in the cyber softwares are sold, and then ever helpful are these hackers groups which put out lists on the internet displaying the vulnerabilities of a particular country. So the widely available technology also complicates the scenario. And then the final point is about the lack of international collaboration. So unlike the nuclear technology where you have international agreements to control the spread of the nuclear technology, there is no such agreement in place yet which says that, these are the technologies which constitute offensive cyber technologies and these are the technologies which constitute the defensive cyber technologies. You may disagree with, for instance, in the nuclear field about the discriminatory nature of the nuclear disarmament regimes and the arms control regimes, but there is at least an agreement that these are the nuclear weapons which are offensive and these are the nuclear weapons which are defensive. These are the tactical weapons, these are the strategic weapons. But that kind of an agreement is not there in the cyber field. And so even though there is a tiny work done in the form of international collaboration like the computer emergency response team, the CERTs of different countries getting together and joining hands to look at the vulnerabilities, but that is just a confidence building measure. That has not really translated into the next set of cooperation between the international countries. And the final point is in terms of the vulnerability of the critical infrastructure. How vulnerable are we for the critical infrastructure? I will say very much. And that's because most of the supervisory control and data acquisition systems, the SCADA systems and the industrial control systems which are there, which are used and deployed in India's critical national infrastructure, are all legacy systems deployed 20 to 30 years back when they were supposed to be isolated from the internet, when there was no internet. Now these systems, without plugging the security gaps, are being connected to the internet. And that's the problem. This transition has taken place without addressing that security gap, and therefore we are still very vulnerable. Stuxnet has shown us, what was in the speculative realm so far actually happening in the reality. But Stuxnet also showed us that had that attack proceeded forward, it would have probably caused a meltdown and would have probably caused a contamination and then the subsequent loss of human lives. So we are also vulnerable from that point of view. So, just to say last point, conflict is not new. Use of sophisticated technologies in the conflict and war is not new. And what has not changed is the human will to enter into violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir Patil. I think the risk, all of you in one sense, I don't think anybody will say the risk of cyber warfare is overstated. It's there persistent, it's there present, it's there underground. And I think the most cleverest attackers will be those who will make sure that they're not detected. They continue to attack, keeping your, shall I say, off guard, or shall I say, running at suboptimal efficiency. It's one of the things that they talk about, they run in. That Pakistan was able to, with the same technology, set up a nuclear plant in 3 years, and the Iranians took over 10 years, because they slowed them down and created problems. So you will find that in your own factory, in your own units, in your own manufacturing units, if somebody, your rival or somebody wants to make an attack, he makes sure that your systems keep on going down, and you don't know what is wrong. And finally, your management says that, my technical people are useless, they'll sack a few people, and the best people they may sack. And the result is that, there is loss of morale and a psychological damage which is done And if you do it right across the board, you will then find a series of what I would call as, it's actually psychological loss of confidence. The other day I was just mentioning to my panelists that, you attend an international conference here, many of you exchange business cards, you go back, you had discussion over tea, coffee, and then you get a call from one of your colleagues that you have met here, and you exchange a lot of information based on the conversations that you've had here and so on. And when you meet him at the next conference, and you say, thank you very much for keeping in touch and so on, and then he says, who are you? I never sent an email to you in the last 6 months. Last time we met was at the conference, and I have not sent anything to you. And that's the really scary part, which many people now say, we don't even want to exchange business cards, we don't want to have any communication after conferences, and you get that little psychological wariness of trying to communicate, and where normal human being tendencies to trust and be friends and so on, you are not very sure where you are getting the message from. And that's one part of the cyber warfare. We have a few minutes. The panelists, I'd met them before this, they said, if you have any particular questions or any comments, we could take it in the next 10 minutes. Anyone? The floor is open. Yeah. Can you take one?
I come from the control system side. After I had a look at what Stuxnet did, I believe that our country is completely vulnerable, and I don't think that our enemies need to exploit that vulnerability right now. They don't have to prove it, that they can launch an attack on us. For the simple reason, some of the things that you quoted, the power grid failure in India, and then the launching of the satellite, which was sabotaged by one of the cyber attacks, and then what happened is for the people who were settled down in Bangalore, the Northeast community people, whosoever it is, I don't know, I don't want to guess, and most of us can guess from which sources they came from, but they have proved the point that they can't shut down the electricity supply here in India. Fortunately, the southern grid is not connected, and so that it was protected. And they have also proved that the Indians are vulnerable in the sense that they can be excited and made to do certain things which are not expected under normal circumstances. And then our satellite failure shows that our control systems are entirely dependent on imported material, and they can do that. So you can have any number of planes, you can have missiles, you can have nuclear weapons, but at the time when it is most required, they can all be made to come to a grinding halt. I think we need to pay more attention to this, and that's my humble submission.
Okay. I take note of the point. I think only on the lighter side, I'd like to say that because I have a lot of friends in the Northeast, and they said when that incident took place, a very large number of them actually didn't panic. But the message went around in their internal SMSs saying there's a free ride back home, free trains are going, taking all the people, so please come along with us and go. So a very large number of them took advantage of that free ride back home and back also. So
yeah, I got only one point against that.
So
the point
I mean,
that when people get excited,
yeah, the point is
railway
taken.
stations don't work, and water supply gets contaminated, there's going to be panic in this country.
Yeah, I agree.
And will our defense forces pay attention at that time to the real enemy fighting the war, or would they be asked to fight the internal war here, internal turbulence?
Okay. There's something they want to speak here.
Another specific I would want to draw your attention, sir, Mr. Pillai. One of the gold sponsors of this event is a perceived adversary in the telecom manufacturing. Many of us are aware. There was some news some time back in the public domain which was circulated widely on the vulnerabilities that we are incorporating by drawing equipment from such suppliers, both in the private and the public sector service providers.
You can't hear. Can you just speak?
It is regarding the one of the telecom manufacturers. Advisory is what is perceived. Some of this, the vulnerability was widely covered in the media, in the public domain some time back. Wish to know your views, more so, being in the know-how of the inside information from the government, whatever much you can share. How well are we covered on that? Did we progress, or is there something really done towards that concern?
Yes, there are certain vulnerabilities, and these have come about partly because we had tenders from a particular country which, in a particular zone, the price was 10% of the same quotation for another zone. And obviously at that price, it would not even meet the hardware costs, let alone the software and other things. So obviously there is a certain, shall I say, motivation or strategic interest why that particular company wanted to get into that particular area. So that is something which, because of the lack of security awareness, government came to know about it much later, after the contract and everything was signed. But we had taken the safeguards to make sure that, assuming that it's a compromised system, then what happens if it gets compromised, and then the fallback and safety loops have all been sort of planned so that to make sure that the systems and the networks are safe. That's the only thing we can do at this particular stage, but it happens. And therefore, it's something, it's happened to not many other countries also. It's not just India, it's countries in the West, countries in Asia and so on. All of them have faced at various points of time this particular type of, what shall I say, long-term strategic infiltration. And that's something which every country is taking care of it. It's one of the reasons which they mentioned that 120 countries are, taking up cyber warfare as a, because they're all worried about it. Most countries have been, and you've seen from the PRISM and the type of the widespread. In fact, if the Guardian report is that only less than 1% of what is there in the Snowden tapes have been released so far, you can just imagine what is going to come in the next, it's being leaked out slowly and slowly. So it's a vulnerability which I think it's something you are going to live with, because you can't go back and say, let's go back to the Stone Age. So you are going to have to, more and more, you are going to get networked, and more the vulnerabilities will be there. And as you mentioned in the morning, the keynote speakers all mentioned, you just have to build in security to a large extent, and the processes with the humans, making sure that you follow the procedures and the simple safeguards, which unfortunately we are all human, and therefore we all have our weaknesses, and in a weak moment we violate the standard operating protocols, and it's just that one weakness is enough for the penetration to take place and compromise the system. So it's something which you will have to do all the time.
So what is the steps that we are taking as far as, to avoid, from the government perspective, to avoid a Snowden type of a leak that we would see here? And the other thing is, as far as protecting the infrastructure from a, telecom provider's perspective is very important, and, also for making sure that our laws are capable of addressing the requirements. For example, most of the servers and the emails, and most of them reside outside India. So what steps are we taking to address those kind of issues?
If you want to answer that, I can get the question. No, what steps we are taking? See, the National Cyber Security Policy is there in the public domain. There is a series of steps which are being taken now to, shall I say, ring fence some of the critical infrastructure, networks and so on. So that is a continuing process which is taking place. I don't think we are anywhere near it. I don't think any country in the world is also fully protecting their systems. Some countries are much more advanced than we are. We are late starters to this. But I think we should slowly catch up. There's a whole wealth of talent here. but we need much more what we call cyber security officers and cyber security warriors to be able to, ring fence ourselves to a reasonable extent, because it is so wide that, I was told that in the United States, they said that a very critical analysis said there is no way you can prevent somebody from hacking into your system. It's there's always that guy will be one step ahead of you, whatever you do. But what you can do, and what many people are doing, is at least you can make sure that once he hacks in, he can't get out. It's like that Chakravyuh thing, you come in, you can't get out. So you make sure that nothing can go out without it going through a internal vetting and screening. So that is a sort of technologies to which people are now looking at in the West, because they're saying that whatever you do, whatever the system, there's always be somebody willing to hack into the system, and it's quite possible for him to do it.
So one point I'd like to last mention is that if you look at crypto algorithms,
which one?
Crypto, then encryption algorithms have been, surrounded by France and certain companies in the US, particularly based out of Washington DC. They manufacture the majority of the crypto chips, basically for almost all the equipment. So there are initiatives today outside of this to get on to building out crypto chips outside of these two countries. Are we taking any steps to build these kind of crypto chips, which will typically help us to secure communication between providers, or secure communication between at critical points like the internet exchange points or any other kind of mobile interconnectivity as we see?
Yeah, systems are in place. I think I think the defense forces and so on are having their own unique, you want to put it, local area networks, systems which are totally different. For the top government, there's another set of systems which are not linked to any of these, so that in the event of the your normal PBX or your MTNL landlines going out of order, or the other telecommunication lines being affected, you still have a fallback onto which you can fall. So that those systems are all being put into place. But this is something which we just have to live with. It's something which I think the real progress, when I look at it, is going to come from actually all you technology companies out there. Because as you are building up your integrated, your security into the system itself, many of you will now come forward and say, my system will make sure that you protect it. And that's where consumers are going to say, we'll buy this because it's safe. It's like you buy a refrigerator, which is a 5-star refrigerator, because it's, lower energy, better efficiency and so on. This will be the hallmark in the future would be, you're looking at systems and networks and so on which are safe, and people will say, no, don't go to Gmail, don't go to Yahoo, don't go to this because it's not safe. And people will then migrate. The consumer itself is going to be the best. But my own feeling, at least from what today's, experts can say, I don't think there's any real answer to it. Everybody is, why is President Obama himself not being allowed to use iPhone and iPad? So you know that at the presidential level itself, they're not willing to, they think that it can be compromised. Okay. Yeah.
You see, basically, one has to have the capability to attack. And the people around or your likely adversaries must know you have that capability. And most important, which is what President Obama has done, is a doctrine. You must announce what your threshold is. And beyond that, you must have the will to attack or take action. For instance, the same thing happened, nothing very new. He covered on the nuclear field. Even in electronic warfare, same thing happened. When we started doing electronic warfare after Second World War, it kept on improving till it came to a point that it became too strong for the normal technology to function. So what is the present arrangement? If there is an electronic attack against our country, it is an act of war. Period. So today, suppose we, as India, the country, issue a doctrine that any cyber attack on A, B, C, you specify, is an act of war. So that's one way of conveying that this is my threshold, beyond that please don't move. But inherent in that are two things. A, you must be capable of taking strong action. And B, you must have will. And three, which is very important, is take decision. That yes, I'm going on war or going attack. So this otherwise, all this technology point of view, it's a race between technology and anti-technology. You have tank, you have anti-tank. You have missile, you have anti-missile, kind of a thing. So that will carry on. That race is on. But the issue therefore is how much vulnerability can I cover? Now you talked about networks. We have legacy networks. The basic thing in security is that security cannot be strapped on. It has to be built in. That you can do now. But what about the legacy networks? And the legacy networks get integrated with normal networks? So therefore, you have to start designing your own gateways, your own systems which will block any assault that's coming your way. So there's a lot of action that we need to take with regard to building the capability. And as far as the nation is concerned, we need a doctrine of cyber warfare or doctrine for information warfare.
See, the basic problem is about 50% of what you do will come into the public domain. 50% will not come into the public domain. That's every country. Nobody will disclose everything that they are going to do. So, unless, of course, you get a Snowden type of leak, then of course it comes out. But otherwise, it doesn't come. It's all kept secret because what you do, you don't want the other to know. There's a lot of, intelligence which, from the PRISM network itself, a lot of countries have shared in that intelligence gain. India is one of the gainers also of that. So, I don't think it's something which is, there's a bad side to it, but there's also a good side to it. So, it's both plus and minuses, we have to live with that. I think. Okay, last comment.
Just one last point. The key to address the cybersecurity challenges is basically the public-private partnership. And I know the National Security Council Secretariat has done a great amount of work where it has brought in the business side into addressing those security challenges. But the problem that the government faces sometimes is that, there is no forthcoming participation coming from the businesses to say that, these are our vulnerabilities because of the primary of the business reasons, saying that, probably the competitors would exploit our vulnerabilities or, there'll be loss of confidence from the shareholders in that particular company. But the key is essentially the businesses to come forward and join hands with the government so that these challenges can be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the organizers tell us we've run out of time and we're getting ready for the next session. Thank you very much. Thank all the panelists also. Thank you very much. Thank you.